Welcome back to the 5 Days of December Book of Shadows Challenge. So today is our first official day of the challenge. If you're catching this video after the challenge, no worries. This video will probably still be very relevant to you because we're just going to be talking about the major themes of the celebration of midwinter solstice. And don't worry, because I'm pretty sure there's going to be more challenges, so stay tuned. So we're going to begin by talking about the theme of light. So obviously, in the modern interpretation of the winter solstice celebrations, it's all about lights. Everybody's got lights everywhere. We've got these little, sparkly, what do you even call these things? I don't know, I guess they're just called Christmas lights. I like to call them fairy lights. And everybody's house is covered in them, and now people even have these like spotlights that will like put different colored lights over their house in the darkness. And it makes you wonder why are we so obsessed with these little lights during the winter season? And there's a very real reason for it. It's because going back to ancient times, before we had electric light, it would have been candles. So in a vast dark world where there's just a single candle glowing, that became a major symbol in the human collective consciousness, and for very good reason. The winter solstice is the darkest day of the year. So basically what that means is that the sun is at, from what it looks like at our perspective, it's at its lowest point of the entire year. So it doesn't set very high in the sky, or it doesn't rise very high in the sky. It kind of just rises a little bit for a few hours and then sets right back down again. And where I live, it's like it gets dark at 4:30 in the evening, whereas like 6 months later at the summer solstice, it gets dark at like 9 p.m. So that's a huge difference, and even though we feel it to some extent, our ancestors must have felt it way more because they couldn't just flick a switch to turn the light on when it got dark. When the nights were long, the nights were long. So things that they were used to doing in the daytime, they couldn't do once it got dark. So that meant that they were less productive during the winter season. It was kind of a time to rest for the most part. They did most of their work in the warmer season, especially agricultural societies, and then basically they just stored up whatever they had grown or whatever livestock they had, and they just tried their best to make it last over the winter, and they just kind of had to pass the time, until spring came around again. And so of course things like bonfires, it would have obviously started with bonfires, became that central place of warmth and light where everybody would gather around. And if you didn't have that, you would die basically. That theme of togetherness, warmth, and artificial light of some kind, whether it just be a kindled fire or actual electric lights, are all a really strong theme for this time of year because, you can't just be out wandering around in the world by yourself when there's no accommodations for you out there. You kind of have to come back to the community or come back to your family and work together to create a comfortable and safe and warm environment for yourself and for your loved ones. Specifically, the concept of a light in the darkness, though, I think is really a powerful symbol to look into because it's evolved a lot, obviously, over the centuries. It's not just like, oh, I've got this little candle and that's my only source of warmth and light inside my little hut that has no electricity in it. Like, obviously, that's not the way most of us live now. We have all kinds of stuff. I'm actually staring into a heat lamp right now because it helps to, in this dark time of the year, it helps to light up my videos, and it also keeps me a little bit warmer, so that's really helpful. But the same concept is actually still true when you really think about it. For example, the warmth and light that we've created in our society only works because our society is working together to some extent to make it work. Just as a prime example, my heat isn't working today. Apparently there's something wrong with the furnace in my apartment building, and there's a guy on his way over here to fix it, but like, the only reason why I'm not going to freeze to death is because I live in a society where we have systems in place where, we're working together to make sure that people are not freezing to death. My property managers are legally required to make sure that the heat comes on. That sort of thing. But imagine, if you wandered so far out of society or just didn't want to be involved in the system of society, you also would have to come up with your own way to survive, So it's kind of this weird conundrum that we're in modern times. Like, we complain about the structures of society and say that it should be better, and some of us are working on it and some of us are not, but at the end of the day, none of us can really survive without it, especially because we've become so dependent on the ways that we create this stable society that most of us can't survive on our own completely. We can say we're alone because we live in a solo apartment, but at the end of the day, if I don't know somebody who can fix my furnace, I'm dead. So that kind of turned into a little bit of a ramble, but the point that I'm trying to make is the concept of a light in the darkness is creating, using our tangible human ingenuity and our hands and our brains to create some kind of artificial warmth and light when the sun is absent. And the extreme importance of that, like our race, our human race would be absolutely nowhere if nobody had discovered how to kindle a fire, and then, how to create a bonfire, and then how to, create a candle, and then create electric lights, etc., etc. And up until today, where we can just have these silly little, fairy light things that don't really have a purpose as much, they're not a necessity. But it's so accessible. You can walk to the dollar store and get a string of lights, and most of us have a place to plug it in and it'll light up. And I just think that's a really interesting concept, and sometimes we don't always take those things for what they are. Sometimes we take those things for granted. So it's really important for us to really tap into that concept that, humans desperately need warmth and light at all times. And it can come from different sources depending on the situation, but at the end of the day, we have to have it. And so I believe that one of the reasons why we use Christmas lights in our modern decorations is because it's evolved from this concept that the rest of the world is dark and cold and unknown and scary. But me and my family are going to huddle together around this source of warmth and light that we figured out how to create, and that's how we're going to build the rest of our society in a way. And I feel like the human race kind of just evolved from there in a sense. So really kind of it's like a simple topic, the light, a Christmas light. It can be such a simple concept, or it can be such a deep concept depending on how you decide to think about it. So all of that being said, our journaling topic for today is a light in the darkness. Now, you don't necessarily have to, in your Book of Shadows page, talk about the same concept of it that I just talked about. That's just what came to my mind. Just think of that phrase, a light in the darkness, and think about it in the context of the darkest and coldest time of the year. What does that ring a bell for you? What does that mean to you? Does it mean decorating the solstice tree with your family and memories of doing that? Does it make you think of what ancient ancestors would have had to do? Does it make you think of something else? Does it make you think of a light within? Does it make you think of finding, the passion within yourself to persevere through dark times, or whatever it is? I don't want to give you too many ideas. I want to give everybody the opportunity to kind of just see what flows out of them intuitively. So really fun. All you have to do is create a Book of Shadows page, or I've also kind of changed since the last challenge, I've kind of changed the rules. So it can either be a single page, or it can be like two sides of a book page with the centerfold in the middle. So it could be both of these pages, whatever works for you. So happy journaling. You will have 24 hours just about to create your Book of Shadows page and post it on the correct associated thread in the Gypsy Witch Tribe Facebook group. You will just need to post it by tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. And, you know, even if you are not able to post it on time, do it anyway, because I think you're going to love doing this practice. It will just bring out the most amazing insights, you know, about your connection to the season. So thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to see what you come up with. And until then, brightest blessings.